Coming up tonight, the Ovation Seas spends another day at sea. We learn to fly, and we get down. It's all coming up, so let's set sail. Welcome to day 10 of the cruise view from onboard the Ovation of the Seas' first ever Alaskan sailing. Today was Wednesday, May 22nd, 2019, and our first of 2 sea days headed back south to Seattle. Our noontime location was 52 degrees and 21 minutes north by 132 degrees and 8 minutes west. We, as I mentioned, were at sea the second of our stretch headed south. We had that partial sea day yesterday, and today was the first of the full sea days before we get down there tomorrow. Of course, the second sea day to get there. At the time, our closest land was Queen Charlotte's Island, roughly 60 miles off of the port side. And unlike the other day when we had several ships at night, I did not spot any ships today. We were out in the Pacific Ocean, so it's likely most of the other ships were in the Inside Passage or not around, since it was midweek and not many ships would be departing from Vancouver or Seattle middle of the week to head up north. For our weather, we had a sunrise this morning at 4:42 a.m. and a sunset at 8:28 p.m. tonight. We had a listed high of 55, but it reached 59 degrees today, according to all the TVs around the ship. And we had partly cloudy conditions with high winds of about 28 knots, but it wasn't entirely cloudy. We had a lot of sunshine out there, and those winds were going the same direction as the ship once again. So it was rather calm out there, and an all-around beautiful day with that warm sun again, as we've seen many days this sailing. So it was a great day to be out on the outside decks if you wanted. We had that beautiful sunshine, calm winds, really overall just a nice day outside. But we did have some rough seas. As I mentioned last night, those rough seas began. We hit the Pacific Ocean. They continued throughout the day. You could feel the ship do a little bit of rolling as we sailed on. It wasn't too bad. There was no hull slapping that I have heard as of now. And that's a good sign. It's usually when it gets really wicked, when you start to get that hull slapping and you get that violent whipping action on the ship. Right now, it's still mainly just that rolling action over these large waves that are out there. So then, moving on to the compass summary for today, it was a sea day, so slightly more going on than some of those port days. This morning for me, it started not as early as some of the other days. It was 10 a.m., which meant I got a little extra sleep last night after 6 port days in a row of only about 3 to 4 hours of sleep. It was nice to finally get closer to a full night's sleep, about 6 hours for me, because 10 a.m. was View from the Top, which is an event that I have not seen on any other ship, and that is essentially a secondary captain's corner. The captain's corner, of course, normally features the captain along with many of the top officers answering questions. They've spun it off into its own event with the cruise director and those secondary officers having their own day, questions directly for them, while tomorrow will be the traditional captain's corner with the captain present and all the questions for him. Today's event pretty much felt just like any other captain's corner minus the captain, and it was split. The captain's is the secondary one, but a lot of the questions seem to be directed more towards what the captain should be answering rather than the staff captain who was there. So I'm not sure how well the splitting off actually helped. It certainly was nice having a whole extra hour, because instead of an hour and a half captain's corner as we sometimes see, or having to cut it off early at under an hour, it means that you get 2 full hours if you really want to, with these officers getting a little more light when the captain is not there.
In summary, we've of course got Keith, our hotel director, one of the largest department on board, I guess, covering the entire hotel operation. Staff captain covering the marine and deck side of the operation as well, and then of course Derek, the yummy stuff, food and beverage, and myself, entertainment. So
that was 10 a.m. this morning in 270, so that was really convenient because of course you have the 270 cafe where I decided to get my breakfast, go up to the balcony to watch the event and eat my breakfast while waiting for the event to start. Following that, I took a bit of time to just walk around the ship, enjoy the day a bit. There wasn't too much going on at that point. And around noon, I decided to have lunch at 270 Cafe as well. That was not the best choice. At 12:15 p.m., there was a Sweet Life talk by the next cruise area of the ship in 270 as well. 270 was pretty well packed at the time with people having lunch, and that lecture was certainly not the best thing to be scheduling at that time. It really seemed to put down the average cruiser rather than building up the suites, especially the fact that it mentioned things like better meals for them and higher quality ingredients in the exact same meals for them versus the average guest. So it really made it look like a cheapening of the Royal Caribbean product rather than a building of the suite product. And with the audience there, primarily there for the 270 Cafe rather than the actual event, it really exposed people to information and a viewpoint that probably wasn't the best to be sharing at that time and probably shouldn't be scheduled at that time. I'm sure it was intentionally done to pick up that crowd and try to entice them to suites, but the way that it was presented and the information was told, it really made it look like the Royal Caribbean product was much poorer and cheaper quality than it truly is, because we all know it is a high-end product and the suites just add those extra benefits, but that's certainly not how it came across today in that packed room during the lunch hour. So I took that lunch at noon, got done with that, headed over to the Royal Theater. There was a showing of Live.Love.Legs at 2 o'clock. Made sure I got there early to get a seat. Yesterday's show was absolutely packed. Could not get a good seat in there, even showing up a bit early. But today I made sure I was extra early to get a good seat. First one in, and pretty much nobody was there. Pretty much nobody showed up. It was about 100 people, I would estimate, in the room when the show finally began, which is probably the smallest crowd I've ever seen for an official production show, whether it be a matinee or an evening one. Oftentimes these matinees are absolutely packed because people want to see it a second time if they enjoyed it, or they just want to fit it in without taking away from their evenings. So, especially today when the weather isn't necessarily pool weather, it's the kind of weather that you would expect people want to enjoy that matinee, but not many people show up. It could have been that it was up against a David Greenstein lecture in 270, and we know those are incredibly popular on the sailing and people opted for that instead. But for whatever case, it was a fairly empty one at only about 100 people. But just like last night, it was an incredible show and so worth seeing again. Today I got to sit front row, center seat. I've never sat in the front row in the Royal Theaters. Had front row at many other venues, but not that one because it is so close to that stage. But it was an incredible view with nobody in front of you, just the stage there. There are a few moments where the singers like to go to the very edge of the stage and you're kind of looking up awkwardly. But for the most part, the dancers do stay back that little perimeter to ensure there's enough room, they don't fall off the stage, and at that level, everything is a perfect viewpoint. So as I mentioned yesterday, this is an incredible show, an absolutely beautiful show. It has incredible singing, dancing, and the soundtrack is just awesome. It is not your traditional Royal Caribbean show with some popular songs, some classic songs, some international hits thrown in. Every song in this show is pretty much a club remix of the song that you know and love. So it just gives it that extra bit of energy, that extra vibe to it to really get you excited and pumped and leave you feeling fully energetic when the show's over, because it's just like a giant club atmosphere with all the dancers around, the singers being incredible, and just that high upbeat music throughout the entire thing, that extra little techno vibe to it all. And I mentioned yesterday that it was visually amazing, but part of that visual amazement comes from the sheer amount of stuff going on that stage. There aren't really sets to it. There's one set piece that kind of drops down from time to time, but that's really about it. The rest of it's relying on projections, video screens, and most importantly, the costumes and the dancers themselves. And that's where the dancers really fill that entire stage. Almost the entire show, they are just filling every inch of that stage with their elaborate costumes, really giving a complete feeling show without the use of sets. And unlike most where you have some smaller scenes, some small dances, a little more intimate stuff. For the most part, from beginning to end, the show was all the dancers on stage at almost all time. During those times where you usually have things slow down a bit, they took and had a single singer come out and combine it with some video projections to help cover the fact that those dancers had to go back and change. So rather than having smaller groups, it was almost like you got everything, or they let them go get changed and brought them back out, which really helped keep that energy up while still allowing those little slower, more intimate moments with the singers and those videos going, which at times was just as energetic as the actual dancers being out there with some of the video choices they made. But it really made the show feel special and different from those traditional Royal Caribbean ones, because you don't normally see that large of a dance sequence except for maybe once or twice during a show, oftentimes for a finale or an opening, but it really is the entire show with those large elaborate dance sequences. In addition to that, it really keeps building on itself. It flows from one song right into another so smoothly. They have costume changes that just kind of flow out. They bring out the dancers at some points in these large groups, and other times let it just slowly build with one adding at a time. And it really does the same thing over and over, but keeps doing it in slightly different ways. It just makes it a little more interesting as it goes on. So that was 2 o'clock. Lasted till about 3 o'clock. I then went to get ready for dinner. Tonight we had 5:15 dinner. Day 10 menu was another casual one. We have one left that I'm sure will be casual for tomorrow, so that means that we can officially say at this point we had just 2 formal nights and 9 casual for this 11-night sailing, not the 3 formal, 3 smart casual remainder, or casual that was listed on the website or that was mentioned by Royal Caribbean prior to sailing. This is an issue that seems to come up a lot on sailings. People question what the number of nights are going to be for the different dress codes. People have to pack, they have to fly places, and when you got to fly, you need to make sure you pack only what you need. So not knowing what the dress codes are different nights really kind of makes it an issue for a lot of people. And for some reason, this is something that is mentioned on the Royal Caribbean website. They often send links to that when you ask the question, but it is not included in the actual documentation for the cruise, and it doesn't seem to be as standardized as it's portrayed. It's rarely done in the way that's on the website with smart casual. It's normally just casual and formal. It's typically following the formal number. This sailing was a bit odd that we didn't, but the smart casuals are hit or miss, and that's where if they would include it in that documentation that everybody gets, it would be black and white. You'd know it, I think it's like 60 or 90 days before sailing, exactly how many of each type you're going to have, and you have plenty of time to get ready. So hopefully in the future they can look at potentially adding that to the information in that documentation, because it does provide you everything you need to know about when to get the ship, what's allowed, not allowed, but it just does not tell you the dress code, which would be incredibly helpful for people. And that document is customized to your individual sailing. Your actual port of arrival details are in there, so I'm sure it would be possible for them to add specific sailing details such as the dress code and how many of each night there will be. So for the menu tonight, I started with the antipasti for my appetizer and also went with the baked French onion soup. Not sure why, but tonight's baked French onion soup was just off for some reason. Didn't finish it, just did not taste quite as good as it did in the past nights. I don't know if it was a little bit blander or something, but it was overall just not as good as the previous nights that we've had at this sailing. For my entree, I then went with the baked polenta and feta cheese, one I've had on many sailings. This one often looks different with each sailing. Polenta tasted just like it always does. Great tasting dish. Would have been better if they used smaller vegetables. The vegetables were a little bit too big, so you couldn't quite eat them as easily with the polenta as you'd like. And the feta was in giant cubes, where on many of the other ones you see it kind of crumbled or sprinkled over top so you can eat it without, where the cubes made that a little difficult as well. So this one tasted the same as the others, but the actual format of it was not quite as good as we've seen on some of the other ships. And then for dessert, I went with the pear blueberry cobbler, another one I've had on other ships. Changes design a lot, and that one was delicious tonight. It was more that purple jello style that we've seen on a couple of the ships now. Tasted just like we've had in the past, and that one is always a delicious one. I also got with that strawberry ice cream. I've been getting vanilla ice cream with my desserts, but tonight I decided to go with the strawberry ice cream. And in the dining room, the strawberry ice cream actually includes pieces of strawberry in it, so that was really good. I've been getting the strawberry up on the pool deck, but in the dining room, the strawberry is much better because it's got those pieces in there. It's a really good, high-quality strawberry ice cream, not just the generic stuff that you often find. So that completed my dinner. After that, headed over to the Bionic Bar in the Royal Esplanade. They had a special event going on called Man vs. Machine, and this was one that put the Bionic Bar itself up against man. See who's better at making drinks, humans or the robots. So it featured the Bionic Bar attendant controlling the robots themselves, as well as emceeing the event, along with a bartender from the Ale and Oak pub, and of course a lot of guests showed up. So basically, pick a drink. They went through 3 of these, chose a drink, had the robot make one, as well as got somebody from the audience to come up and work with the bartender to make the drink as well. When they were both finished, put them up on the bar, found a guest in the audience, had them come out and try each drink and pick which one they felt was the better one. And today, 2 of the 3 were picked as the human being better. The one where the robot won, though, I'm not quite sure he really won. Overall, the robot seemed to have a lot of trouble today. This was a competition, but compared to normal, where the robot is pretty standardized and works the same way every time, it seemed to really struggle during the event. It repeatedly spilled the drinks, which we don't often see. In all 3 cases, it overflowed the glass. It seemed like it was dropping more ice than it was required to for the drinks, and as a result, the cups were overflowing when it would try to pour them out. In the 2 cases where the robot lost to the man, it was because the drink was viewed as being too watered down. And in the 1 case where it won, it was because the person felt that the human one was too strong of an alcohol, which seems to be the same thing, that perhaps the robot one was too watered down. So in all 3 cases, it seems like it just put too much ice in that drink. So I've never gotten a drink from the Bionic Bar, so I can't say whether that is a normal problem that they get watered down or not, but it certainly looked like an issue today that is not normal, for it to put too much ice and just overflow every one of those drinks, because it wasn't just one, it was every one, and the way that the system load balanced between the 2 robots meant that 2 were made on the one robot and 1 on the other, and both robots did the exact same thing. So there's clearly something odd going on with it this evening when it was trying to make these drinks during the competition, and it clearly caused it to lose. Whether that was the entire reason it lost or not, I'm not sure, but it did lose the competition. And that was, of course, to guests, not even a true bartender, which says a lot about the future of bartenders and whether robots really are going to take their jobs away from them or not. So that was 7 o'clock. After that, I headed to the Royal Theater. At 8:30 tonight was the headliner showtime starring Mario and Daniel, 2 funny guys. That was an absolutely hilarious one. They've been doing this for Royal Caribbean for 19 years, only do about a dozen sailings a year, so they are not out there a lot. Not like some of the other ones that do half the year on these ships. They spend the majority of their time off in Vegas, where they have a show on the Strip. And they were hilarious, and it was very physical comedy compared to the other comedians that we've seen. Most of them have relied on the audience interaction, doing a little more of a response comedy. This was a true classic stand-up comedy. They had a full lineup of jokes that they went through, a lot of physical humor, a lot of gags, and what was really interesting is I think in all the years that I've cruised, this is the first time there have been 2 comedians, and that completely changed the game for this show. They were able to play off each other the entire time and did an incredible job. They are brothers, so they had the incredible family chemistry right there that allowed them to just perfectly play off each other. They've done it so long that they just had their timing, everything just so perfect for the show, and it was probably, if not the best comedy I've seen in a while. It is not the cheap comedy or relying on the shock jokes. It was true comedy that you want to see. So that was absolutely hilarious, and I hope we'll see them on more ships because they are definitely a big act. I'm not sure they're viewed as one of the bigger ones because I have not seen them on any of the other sailings, and we often see some of those larger stars show up on those, but they are certainly worthy of being considered one of the higher level Royal Caribbean guest entertainers in the fleet. So that was 8:30, got done about 9:20, headed right down the Royal Esplanade, the Via, through the Rotund, over to 270 because the entire night was then about 270. Started off with the Ovation Rocks pre-party, featuring the DJ playing some tunes in 270. Some members of the cruise director staff showed up a little bit later on, but primarily just the DJ and guests waiting for the big event to start because 10 o'clock was then the Ovation Rocks dance party. This is a creation of Joff Eden, and it was so obvious the moment it started. You could tell through and through that this was a Joff Eden creation. He of course created this as a compliment to the lineup on board the ship. On board the Independence of the Seas, he has Rock Britannia, which is an incredible show, and I've said it many times as we've had these parties, compare them to Rock Britannia because none of them seem to come close to it. That really set the bar. That was back in 2012, set the bar truly high for what a good party is. And Ovation Rocks, very close. Don't think it surpassed it. Not sure that's the party's fault. Probably the guest's fault. I don't think we had as energetic a crowd or a larger crowd as we had for that Rock Britannia event. But the actual event itself, way up there. Of all the parties that I've seen added over recent years, this one by far surpassed any of them. It was an incredible event. The music choice in it was so crowd-catching. It got everybody in it. It was songs that everybody loves, a lot of classic hits, all the big ones. And then on top of that, we're used to parties in the Royal Promenade with that beautiful ceiling, all those colors, those lights coming down. We've seen them in the Centrum, and they have some incredible effects in there as well with the new lighting that's available to them. We haven't seen that on the Quantum Class. The Quantum Class parties really have not been the greatest. We did not see Groovy Town turn out that great, and that was the original Quantum creation in Music Hall. We did have the 70s Disco Inferno in 270 this week. It was okay. It wasn't the greatest party. It was not as good as the 70s Disco Infernos from some of the other venues. But tonight, what really set this apart was the flow of it, the humor of it, the way the cruise director staff interacted in it, the way that it utilized the venue with the chutes and the risers, the way it took advantage of all the different areas, and the way that the cruise director staff moved around the entire venue. But the biggest thing was it used the lighting. That is what we haven't seen in a Royal Caribbean Quantum Class party up to this point, is using the venue properly. They did not use Vistoramas, which I mentioned would probably help the 70s Disco Inferno. It would probably help this one as well. But the big thing is those colored lights that they can shine on the Vistorama backdrop, those actual windows, and light up the frames when the Vistorama is not in use, are far more capable than I knew. They've never used them. I've never seen them really used like they were used tonight. I've seen them in shows where they change colors, turn on and off, fade, things like that. But tonight, they were doing rapid flashing, they were chasing, it was checkerboarding, they had all different effects going on that gigantic wall that just covers the entire back of the venue. And it truly felt like the capabilities of the Royal Promenade ceiling right on that back wall. And when you combine that with all the different lighting that just surrounds the entire venue, from the balcony pointed down, from under the robo screens, from the ceiling, it really created a neat effect with so much light, so much activity filling the entire room. It was truly an incredible, breathtaking party to watch. And Bohemian Rhapsody was included, and really impressive to it, they actually had 3D sound in it. 270 is, of course, the original theater in the Royal Caribbean fleet to get 3D sound. where in Star Water they could make a sound appear anywhere in the venue. No matter where you were sitting, they could drop that sound in one location and everybody would hear it as if it was in that single spot. And that is something the newer ships have in the Royal Theatre. Music Hall can't do, the Royal Promenade can't do, but 270 with Ovation Rocks took advantage of that. And during Bohemian Rhapsody, you could hear at one point that there was a sound that clearly came from the library area of 270, which is a very odd area to have it come from. It was not coming from the left side, the right side, the front or the back. It wasn't one of those clear sounds. It was clearly coming from a specific location in the room, which is only possible with that 3D sound. So that was an incredible effect in the party, and that was the only time I really picked up on it. I tried to listen more from then, and I kind of heard it going on a bit, but nothing as blatantly obvious as that moment. So hopefully they get more of that, because it really livens that party and adds a really neat effect when that sound not just fills the room, but moves around the room in that way. And if you combine that with some Vistoramas, you could have an insane party going forward. But tonight, that's probably the second best party that I've experienced in the Royal Caribbean Fleet. So that says a lot, considering that the Quantum classes never even come close to a good party. And then I've said this many times, it's important to get flow. It's important to get things to roll into one another. And they pulled that off tonight. As soon as that party was over, they had D.S.B, the Journey cover band, come out, and they flowed straight into that. The lighting, everything continued to flow into that performance, and it just picked up right where the party stopped. It kept the vibe going, kept the energy up there, really continued it off until I think about 12:30 tonight. And that was the cover band for the sailing. They never performed a music hall. They only performed the one event in 270. Oftentimes we'll see them do 2 or 3 nights of music hall and then one show in 270. Some reason they opted just for that one show in 270, but that was the official cover band for the sailing, so we did have one of those after all for the voyage. And of course this is a group that if you've been watching, you know we haven't seen before. We've seen many of the cover bands, we have not seen this one. This was Journey, played all the big hits, of course, of Journey. Didn't actually know how much Journey did, not the biggest follower of Journey, so I was kind of surprised just how many of their songs I'd recognize. That's part of the reason I love those cover bands, is they often aren't bands I'm a fan of or know about, but I always go to check them out because oftentimes I don't realize just who these bands really are. I just know their songs from the years. So that ended the night about 12:30. From there, tonight at 2 a.m., it is now 3:30, so it is 4:30 because 2 a.m. the clocks officially went back to Pacific time to get us ready for Seattle, so that was 1 hour sleep loss. So it is currently 3:37, but really 4:37 in the morning that I'm filming this. But that was the end of the night. Ship really kind of slowed down, emptied out once that event was over. Surprisingly decent crowd stayed for the event. The party itself was packed, standing room only, but decent number of those people did stick around for the Journey band, and probably about a quarter stuck around all the way to the end of the night at 12:30.
1, 2, 3, go! Sound good? Hold on to that beat.
So then, continuing with the 270 theme of the night, I do have an interview for tonight. I got to sit down with the dance captain and aerial coordinator, Amara, who was, of course, in Pixels. Today I'm joined by Amara, who is the dance captain and aerial coordinator on board the Ovation of the Seas for 270. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, nice to meet you.
So could you give a little bit of a background on yourself?
So as you said, my name is Amara. I'm born and raised in New Jersey. Started dancing from the age of 5. I went to a local dance studio in my town, and then I went on to joining a performing arts program in high school. And then from there, I went on to a performing arts college in Philadelphia, University of the Arts, where I earned my BFA in dance performance.
So what led you to join Royal Caribbean and a life at sea?
It's funny, actually, because I never thought I would be at sea. Senior year of college, it's just a constant schedule of going to auditions and trying to book your first job out of school. And it just so happened that my second try with auditioning with Royal Caribbean, I landed the job. So right out of college, I started with Royal Caribbean.
Yeah. So as an aerialist, it obviously takes a lot of time and effort to learn those skills, a lot of danger. How did you go through actually learning how to become an aerialist?
Well, I did take a few classes in college. I honestly just took it to get some credits, but I actually ended up really enjoying it. And then Royal Caribbean said there was no experience needed because they would teach me everything that I needed to know. So they taught me all the skills, harness work, doing several apparatuses, and they definitely made sure that our bodies were up to condition. So we exercise, push-ups, pull-ups, everything that you need to build your strength up, because you are holding yourself up by your own two hands.
Yeah.
So it's just constant practice, conditioning, keeping up with your physical fitness. It took a lot of time, of course, a lot of cuts and bruises too.
On board the Ovation of the Seas, the big show is Pixels. Could you give a little bit of a background on the concept?
So Pixels is an amazing show. It includes, there's 16 cast members. So there's 6 girls, 5 boys, 3 singers, and 2 musicians. We have a saxophonist and a percussionist. And the show is actually derived from another show on Anthem of the Seas, which is Spectre's Cabaret. And it's a shorter version. Our host is female. And it's honestly just a celebration of music, which combines music, dance, and technology. The 270 venue is very, very different from a normal theater that you've ever been in. So you're kind of immersed in the space, and you're kind of in the show when you're there. So we're dancing with each other, we interact with the audience constantly, and we interact with the technology, with our robots. There's 6 ginormous robots that kind of become like a 17th cast member. So they have their own feature at the beginning of the show, and they're featured in the middle of the show as well. And then we have our Vistoramas, which is a 270-degree projector screen, which creates like this amazing canvas, which just translates to something that you've never seen before at sea.
So as part of a cast member, your onboarding process includes a visit to the Royal Caribbean production studio down in Miami. What is the experience like in there?
The experience in Miami is incredible. We're very busy. That's where we all first meet. So we may have known each other from other contracts, but ideally, a cast, that's where we first meet for the very first time. The day before, we all meet, and then the next day we start writing rehearsals. And there could be 25 other casts in the studio as well. They do have their own housing for us as well, which is literally a 2-minute walk from the studio. And the studio space is absolutely beautiful. There's about 20 to 30 studios. And there's a studio with rigging, so we can practice our flying. We work 6 days a week, so we have our Sundays off. And it also depends on how busy the schedule is. Sometimes we're on night shift, and sometimes we're on the morning shift. And that's where we learn all of our shows before we even join the ship. We map out, or we tape out the floor in the size of the stage that we'll be on. And there's numbers, and we create the wings on the floor and everything, so that way you know what you're doing, where you have to be, so that by the time you get on stage on the ship, you know exactly what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
How is it to transition then from that studio experience to the actual 270 venue?
It's different, especially with 270. There's not really a front and back. You're seen from all angles, whether you're face to face with someone or your back is towards them. People can still see you even if your back is towards them. So getting acclimated with which way we need to face for a certain number, and then we have to quarter turn to this way. It's definitely hard in the studio because we don't have what's in 270 in the studio space. So that's very difficult. Obviously the stage movement as well. We're dancing on a flat floor in the studio. And then once we get to the stage, stage lifts are moving. They're rising while we're dancing, or we exit quicker than we normally are in the studio. So it's definitely a challenge. It's a very technical venue. That's all I can really say. So there's things moving at all times, at all costs. Yeah. So you have to be very, very aware and very cautious of where you are and where you're stepping and what's moving, and because it's very easy. It's live theater, so things do go wrong. Things move when they're not supposed to, but we always aim for them to move when they're supposed to.
The 270 casts are pretty much in the public eye the entire sailing whenever things are going on, and that includes the strength training, and during those oftentimes there's skill sharing as well that goes on. What are those events like? What is that experience?
Yes, so we do hold conditioning and fly rehearsals, as well as other rehearsals that we may need. 270 never closes, so when we do have those rehearsals, we are in front of guests all the time. So it's fun because the guests do enjoy seeing behind the scenes of what goes on behind pixels. Conditioning we hold every single cruise, if not twice a cruise. We work on our skills, our pull-ups, our push-ups, our core strength, all of that. We have to climb the rope. There's specific guidelines that we have to follow that the Miami Studios has us do. And we do hold fly rehearsal every single cruise. It is required, just so that we can continue to work on all of our skills, so that we make sure that in the show everything goes the way it's supposed to, and making sure that all the cues that our rigging specialist is flying is correct in timing with our routine, making sure that all of our counts and we're smoothing transitions so it's just seamless. Yeah.
Pixels is a very interesting show from beginning to end. Every scene is very unique and distinct. What is your favorite scene of the show?
That's a very tough question because I enjoy the entire show, but I would probably have to say my favorite part is our doo-wop section. So we're all in these like colorful dresses and the guys are in suits, and that's my favorite part because everybody's on the stage at the same time. It's very rare during the show. Usually it's that section, and then in Carnival everyone's on stage together. There's people going and coming on stage constantly throughout the show. There's some people that aren't in that section. So I think doo-wop is my favorite. You have a bit of like 50s and 60s, and then we kind of move on to like our more current day, to our Pansula section, where it's kind of like a dance battle between the boys and the girls, and our percussionist and our saxophonist, our hosts. It's all very interactive, and the guests are getting involved as well. So I think that's probably my favorite part.
The aerialists always catch everyone's eyes. The audience always enjoys those scenes. What is the most complicated skill that you perform?
I would have to say harness work. No matter how many times you do it, it's always a tough skill, because you're in this this hardware that if you don't get it right, if it's not sitting in the right place, or it's too tight, or it's slightly just too loose, or it's just one is higher than the other, it's all about finding balance. So when you get into our cables, when we're connected, it's finding your balance. If you're balanced horizontally, vertically, we do a part where we do these fast spins. If the harness isn't sitting in the right place and your feet aren't directly underneath you, that could throw you off and kind of make them a little wonky. So harness work is, it's a very difficult skill. It takes time and patience. That's what I've learned from doing aerial throughout my Royal Caribbean career so far. Harness work takes a lot of patience. As performers, we are perfectionists and we want to get right away. But with harness work, it just doesn't happen that way. So it's difficult. It's fun though. It's very fun.
A lot of the performing arts is about creativity and expressing yourself. How much freedom do you have to be creative, and how do you go about learning and practicing new skills on board?
Right, so when it comes to pixels, what we are taught in the studio is what we have to do on board for however long that we're on board. Whether it's a freestyle movement where there's no choreography given to us at all, we do have the liberty to be creative, but what we are taught, we have to stay in that realm. We cannot change anything. We can't adjust anything. Just to keep the integrity of the show, we have to do what we are taught exactly how it is. We do hold dance classes outside of the shows, and that gives us the liberty to do something completely different than pixels. We do ballroom classes, we do hip-hop classes, ballet classes, contemporary, and we also combine that with the theater cast as well. They also teach as well. So we come together and we all just kind of be free and do something that we miss at home. We all take class at home, if not 7 days a week. And that's hard being on a ship as well, because we are working and performing shows. So we do find the time to host our own dance classes, and it's fun because we all get to inspire each other and learn something that someone else may have not have learned before. So it's really great, and we all learn from each other from that, so it's really nice.
So you're currently on board the Ovation of the Seas, but what's going to be next for you?
It's a good question. So what's next for me is I will take some time at home and be there with my family, get back into taking classes, get into the audition scene again, show my face and say that, I'm still here. I'm hoping to be on the Quantum of the Seas at some point, to be in Starwater. I think that's an amazing, amazing show that Royal Caribbean has produced. So I'm really hoping to be a part of that, because I think it's an incredible show. So if not, then I would love to go to explore the seas. I've always wanted to go to that ship, so I'm still crossing my fingers that maybe I can make it on there someday.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the viewers?
I would say that don't miss Pixels. It's an incredible show on the Ovation of the Seas. It's something that you have to experience in person. Seeing it on video, the show doesn't translate. So being in the space, being immersed with the performers, it's an incredible experience, and I'm sure that you will not leave disappointed. It's an incredible show, so I hope you come see us.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to thank Amara for taking the time to talk to me. I love 270, love that venue. Of course, I love the airless, so it's always interesting to learn about what goes on to make these shows happen, make everything possible, and of course, flying around, moving around inside of a floating vessel is no easy task, so it's always interesting to meet these artists and hear about their experience, what they've done, where they're looking ahead, because that is an incredible talent and always an eye catcher in any show that's included. And with Nick Weir, it's getting in more and more shows. So we're seeing a lot more of these aerialists across the fleet, across the shows, even within ships like this. We've seen it in Live.Love.Legs, saw it in The Dream, and of course Pixels. So that about does it for today. Tomorrow is of course that last sea day, the last day we have before reaching Seattle. And I was looking at marinetraffic.com to track where our ship was, And it actually lists us getting to Seattle at 11:30 p.m. on the 23rd, which is tomorrow. So I'm not sure if we'll be making an early arrival. We are scheduled for 6 a.m. I believe on the 24th. But according to that, we will be there 11:30 p.m. on the 23rd. Looking at the map, we are pretty close already, and we're still going at about 15-16 knots. So I really don't see how we could sail all day tomorrow and get there at 6 a.m. I feel like even 11:30 p.m. could be a bit of a late estimate considering how quick we're going and how far we are already at this point. This morning during the view from the top, the staff captain even mentioned the fact that we probably could have stayed at Endicott Arms and Dawes Glacier a little bit longer yesterday because we have so much time to get back to Seattle. So seems like there's a chance we will have an early arrival. It's kind of nice, means that you can stay up late, watch us arrive in Seattle, and get a good night's sleep instead of pulling an all-nighter like I've had to do in the past. So hopefully we have that 11:30 p.m. arrival to see the ship in, and of course that means the end of the sailing, but that also means tomorrow we will get a final episode of the Cruise View for this sailing, review everything that went on, look back at it all, and I've also got one more interview for this sailing, so be sure to come back for that tomorrow. But for now, I'm Picone. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the links.